So these materialist philosophers, uh, there's two famous ones that were as far as this in this epoch or whatever of Indian ancient Indian materialism. You have a Kananda and Kapila, and these are actually the ones who influenced Buddha, Gautama, and these early Jainism, these Jain philosophers. And this is based on materialism. 'Cause a lot of people don't know that the system of Buddhism is based in materialism. So, and it's atheistic in the sense, like I said, in the sense that they don't believe in the anthropomorphic being, finite being you can point to or name that created things. That's what makes it atheistic. So, it's simple and it's actually rational, right? So, this is the system of Kanada and Kapila. So, this is the system of atomism. And there's not just one system because there are going to be different schools who have different nuances and different rebuttals as they flesh out these concepts. But the basics is always there. You just got to look for the basics and you can come up with your own concepts. This is just some study. So, all substance is composed of parts which are governed by their qualities of inherence and conjunction. That thing at which the distinction of whole and the parts stops, and which therefore marks the limit of division into minute parts, is the atom. Remember, this is ancient, so they postulated the atom. The atoms are the cause of the world. An effect may not be assumed without cause. So the world is the effect of the cause, atoms. The atoms are eternal, belong to four classes which possess corresponding qualities. So here they say the atoms are eternal, which is very, that's very deep. Say that the atoms are eternal. Like I said, a lot of these guys say it's beginningless, and it may be, which is it's kind of that's trippy too. That's still weird, right? And because I know a lot of people, especially with the Western Judeo-Christian models and even Islam, everything's linear and it had a beginning date and it will have an end date. But like these philosophers who I actually respect a little more because they're a little deeper, they say this thing may be beginningless and we can't even, you know, that's what our minds can't really wrap around that concept. But they say the atoms are eternal, belong to four classes which possess corresponding qualities. The atoms of the same class and of similar quality combine to produce the several gross elements. The combination takes place by two causes: the material cause, inherent in the atoms themselves, and the non inherent cause is assumed to be the supernatural will. Uh, so, again, he says the atoms of the same class and of similar quality combine to produce the several gross elements. That's earth, water, fire, air. And so the earth atoms, the water atoms, the fire atoms, the air atoms are those are the different classes, and it takes place by the material cause, saying the atoms themselves. There's something inherent within the atoms. Like I said, you got to pick a word: consciousness, rationale, intent, awareness, whatever. Just to know that they're not stupid. It's not like they said. It's not this chance combination. Like they're just stupid. So then he says there's the other non-inherent cause is assumed to be the supernatural will. So here they do postulate a will, and that's what even with Schopenhauer postulated. Uh, what he called the will to live. There is a will behind these atoms. Um, Now, to postulate the supernatural will would be, in the case of Gautama, he would say it's Mara, and like I said, I would say it's like Demiurge, uh, as far as the creation goes. If we look at the effect of these the atoms are the cause. If we look at the world, the effect I would say is demiurge slash Mara energy. Now that's still not theism because we're not saying this is an anthropomorphic being. We're just giving a name to a certain intent, to a certain mentality, to a certain flavor. Because if you study the world with honest eyes, it has a certain flavor to it that I wouldn't call divine. So supernatural just means it caused nature. It's so in a way it is supreme to nature in a sense. So, but again, this is the non-inherent cause. But they say the material cause inherent in the atoms themselves, and so Then there's a debate. Is the will outside of the atoms, or could it just be the atoms themselves? But in any event, like what they say, the material cause inherent in the atoms, I would say that's like saying every atom at its core contains what people would want to say is God. But that would still be atheism and materialism because, again, you're not saying there's a being. So that's just keep clarifying this. So you could say at the core of every atom is God. Its principle is this intelligence, this intent, this supernatural will. So all substances consisting of parts originate from the substance connected with them by the relation of inherence. So the substance is composed of parts inherent in it. The relation of conjunction operates in the process. Inherent parts of a substance come together, thanks to the relation of conjunction, to produce the substance. Whatever consists of parts originates from those substances with which it is connected by the relation of inherence, conjunction, and cooperating. The whole world is composed of parts. Because it is composed of parts, it has beginning and end. An effect may not be assumed without a cause. Therefore, the atoms are the cause of the world. The atoms are a spherical shape. When the atoms are isolated and motionless, no effect is produced. After that, the unseen principle acting as the operative cause and conjunction cooperating, they produce the entire aggregate of things, beginning with binary atoms. The material cause of the atomic compound is the constituent atoms. The conjunction is caused by the unseen operative cause. That was a lot, so you can rewind that. But yeah, they're saying this thing is intrinsically like I was saying, like a human form is not accidental evolution. The atoms intrinsically, inherently have that template, that program, that informational system, if you want to call it. But I try to stay away from mechanical metaphors when we're dealing with nature and biology because it's much more multifaceted than that. It's not that sterile. But they're saying it's everything is intrinsic, so it's like this a lion. That's an intent. It's not blind, stupid atoms and molecules happening to come together to make teeth and claws and hair and manes and the nose and the pattern and the claws on the on the lion. I mean, it's not that's not the case. This whole thing is intrinsically inherent. The principle of a lion is intrinsic to those atoms, and they coalesce. So the material cause of the atomic compound is the constituent atoms. The conjunction is caused by the unseen operative cause. That's the unseen principle. Um, Again, that's what I would say. Pick your word, whatever you want to call it. So the materialism of the system is evident. The only weak spot in an otherwise self-contained system of purely physical explanation of the origin of the world is the assumption of the unseen, non-inherent cause in addition to the material cause. So this is a book by M. N. Roy, and he's just making a comment on that summary of the atomic world. So he says that that's a weak spot. He's saying, well, we just need to say the atoms. We don't need to say unseen, non-inherent cause in addition to the material cause. I would say if you're going to say just the material cause, like I said, then you could look at it as the atoms have an intrinsic, uh, let's say Mara, is or slash demiurge is at the core of every atom. That principle, that flavor, is at the core of every atom instead of outside the atom. If we want to use 3D thinking, linear thinking. But obviously, the assumption is superfluous, since the tendency to combine is inherent in atoms themselves. There is absolutely no need for an unseen cause to make them coalesce. So he's saying, like we could just observe the atoms and they would do what they do. But that's again, like I said, there's nuances in this atomic theory or atomism, but it's still atomism. So he's talking about the Vaisheshika system does not need an impulse from outside for the atoms to begin aggregating. The tendency to combine is inherent in the atoms. Bigness is produced from plurality inherent in the causes. That is to say, to combine is in the nature of the atoms. So it's in their nature to coalesce. So Kananda himself did not go so far as to visualize his atoms in perpetual motion. The postulation of a motionless state of isolated atoms required the additional postulate of the action of the unseen principle. So they're saying, okay, well, if they're eternal, why did he say, postulate that they were once still and something had to put them in motion and behavior? They're saying that was unnecessary. So somebody would try to remove this defect from the philosophy, and it says perceptible matter is caused by the principle vita inherent in the primal matter. It is a natural propensity of two atoms to unite. Indeed, the commentator makes clear an idea to be found in the sutras themselves. So again, this is always the debate. And to me, honestly, the way I see it is they're really saying the same thing. They really are. Because regardless if you say it's intrinsic to the atom, there's still the knowing there. If you say it's outside the atom and it's sort of pushing it around, well then it's still a form of information direction, So you probably don't have to go that deep, long as you can get the basics of this philosophy, this understanding, the naturalist, materialist, atheist understanding. So, and he goes on to say, well, however, in assuming the superfluous non-inherent cause, like that, the supernatural will outside of the atoms, like I said, because Schopenhauer spotted the will thing. So, I mean, you could also say the will is intrinsic to the atoms, not necessarily pushing around the atoms. But again, we're being, to me, you're kind of still saying the same thing. So he says he did not contradict himself any more crassly than did like Copernicus, Galileo, Descartes, and Newton, and others, who paid homage to the prejudice about God even when they deprived him of all functions. So that's what they're saying. A lot of scientists, even Newtonian physics was bullshit. Copernicus, damn, well, really every scientist he named was full of shit. Copernicus, Galileo. Let's go with Descartes. I don't know exactly what the fuck Descartes did, but he's saying a lot because a lot of these scientists they break stuff down. Even if you describe a mechanical system, somebody's gonna say, well, who designed the system? And he says, so he didn't contradict himself. There's a prejudice about this God concept, but again, it still falls in line with atheism because no being in the sky or up above you making commands, but there is something intrinsic to it. And he's saying, well, that's just like saying God, right? But you just deprived him of all functions. So play with that idea. But basically, we're talking about atoms here and their behavior, and the fact that they are not stupid. They have intrinsic programming, intrinsic templates, and also on top of that, they have a flavor to them. That's what I mean about this world. If you observe the world and the ways of the world, you'll see that the world has a certain flavor to it. It's not just it's not like this. We don't want to look at the world like an equation because it's more to it than an equation. There's it's not just a skeleton. There's covering over it. It's painted a certain way. So. But Kanada system makes no room for the soul in the metaphysical or spiritualist sense of the term. So this is the key. That's what I kept bringing up. This, they say soul, but not in the spiritualist or metaphysical sense of the term. According to it, intelligence is not an inherent property of the soul. It is conceived as a mere adventitious quality of the atoms. So again, they're not saying, again, like I said, there's not this intelligent soul coming into the body. They're saying soul is what the atoms are, if you want to talk about a soul. So and that intelligence that you're saying would be separate, like people say my mind is in my body, separate mind and body. See, these guys wouldn't do that. Not self mind, not ego, not your self mind. They wouldn't do that. They would say, well, this everything you're saying is actually part of this recipe and it's intrinsic to the intelligence of the atoms. So arising only when the soul is joined with an internal organ. So according to it, intelligence is not an inherent property of the soul. It is conceived as a mere adventitious quality of the atoms, arising only when the soul is joined with internal organs. So Kananda agrees the qualities which inhere in the substances constituting the cause originate qualities of the same kind in the substance constituting the effect. So it's like a recapitulation. So that's what I was saying. So it's like, they're not thinking like you, making plans, and matter of fact, that's inferior anyway. But it is like he's saying, it's a recapitulation. Like the atoms have a certain type of consciousness, but they appear to be stupid, we could say, but they're not. But then as they turn to a human, then they become a self-conscious being. And he's saying, well, that's just like we can make a metaphor to say that the atoms themselves, like we could zoom out and look at all these creatures as atoms in a certain sense, like with the behavior between man and woman, especially. So that's what he's saying. It's kind of the qualities constitute the cause, and the same kind as the substance constituting the effect. So, hence, if the intelligent Brahman is assumed as the cause of the world, we should expect to find intelligence inherent in the effect also in the world. This is not the case. Therefore, Brahman cannot be the cause of the world. Consciousness is thus regarded as the product of a complicated combination of atoms. Soul is merely the disposition of organism, which is the combination of matter. So again, that's what I was saying. They say soul, but he means soul is merely the disposition of organism. Just get that clear. It'll become a little sharper about this. Like I said, I mean, just go driving at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and just look at all these damn creatures. Like, do you really think these are like all separate, special souls flying in and out of bodies, each different person? Really? See, that's absurd. And how could the population expand if that were the case? So yeah, some of this I just read too. You can go back over it. So he says, because he says, hence, if the intelligent Brahman is assumed as the cause of the world, we should expect to find intelligence inherent in the effect also, i.e., in the world. So they're saying we don't find any intelligence in the world. So that's kind of like, again, that Gnostic premise where I think what they're trying to say is, if we look at how the world works, it's not it's stupid, right? Like how we say, I say, life is survival. It's stupid because it is stupid, right? I mean, we're headed to a thresher. Like it's like we keep arising and falling. These beings, like I said, like Buddha would say, they come here, they devour each other for a short time, and they die. That doesn't seem intelligent. So they're like, well, definitely not Brahma. If Brahma is supposedly intelligent in that sense. It's senselessness to it, right? But again, like Buddha would say, yeah, you guys are right. It's fucking Mara. Mara is a crazy, homicidal, suicidal, sadistic flavor. So, but I'm going to continue on again. Soul is merely the disposition of organism, which is a combination of matter. At a certain stage of combination, an atomic aggregate acquires the property of receiving impressions of external objects and reacting to them. Consciousness develops at that stage. So yeah, and my man was talking about ants. He said, yeah, atomism makes sense. I mean, it's like the atoms do have some intrinsic knowing, because there's these ants who go to another ant colony. They'll kill the queen and smear her liquid over their bodies to trick the her subjects into thinking that they're the queen. They're like assassin ants. Like, it's sick. That's what I'm saying. That's the flavor of these the principle within these atoms. They have a certain flavor to them that is like I said, it's Mara. It's kind of it's sadistic, it's perverse, it's disturbing. It's it's definitely not divine in that sense of the word, like we think. So, but yeah, the atoms come together and they acquire this. Eventually, once the cake is complete, you can receive sense impressions at that time. So consciousness develops at that stage. The constituents of the soul of the Vaisheshika system are inherent in the substance which constitutes the organism. So again, the soul and the organism are really one, and it's the disposition of the organism, the tendencies. That's what soul is. Like soul music, what is that about? You know what I'm saying? It's being a human, being real human. That's soul. You know what I'm saying? That's what it is. You know that. So, and that substance is composed of atoms, which again are only of four kinds: water, earth, air, and fire. And again, to correspond this back to the Western science, you have Max Planck, who postulated a mind behind the matrix of all matter. Again, so I'm using language, so when we go into this, it could get a little, like so-called confusing. But like I said, just think for yourself. You'll come up with some kind of picture. It's just a very intelligent way to approach this creation, especially with flat Earth. So, moreover, while disputing the immateriality of spirituality of the soul, so they're disputing the immateriality of spirituality of the soul. So, yeah, basically, like I keep saying, same thing. They see that's what I'm saying. They had to get rid of this because this is slavery. Like they're telling people that you have a soul, you're gonna reincarnate somewhere, so you better do this or do that. I mean, it's mind control. That's why they come out. They had to come out and break this down so much to say, look, it's more complex than that. But of course, for the few to hear, so they can break free of this slavery of blind belief or non-analytical belief. So Kananda himself throws overboard the superfluous assumption of the non-inherent cause. He categorically declares that Brahman cannot be the cause of the world. And in another place, he declares equally categorically that the atoms are the cause of the world. The early Indian metaphysicians regarded Brahman as an intelligent being or an intelligent principle. So, yeah, this is where you get to metaphysics. So the metaphysics guys would say, well, okay, it's not really Brahman. He's not really in the sky. Uh, Maybe it could be an intelligent principle, um, which I could respect that concept. They're not fools for coming up with that. So, because that's what I was talking about earlier. So the materialists combated that conception. They could do so because they did not require the postulate of an external intelligence or force to give the first impulse for the origin of the world. So, like I said, it gets tedious. They're saying, well, yeah, but the atoms themselves have this intrinsic inherent property. There's not some like they're saying you always want to you guys are trying to give this external push force, uh like kind of still saying that we should bow down to it, kind of in the sense they're saying, well, no, I mean it's intrinsic. That's why I'm saying no. It's self-created, it's self-contained. So they did not require the postulate of an external intelligence or force to give the first impulse for the origin of the world. Therefore, their materialist speculation was self-contained. The formal inclusion of the conception of Brahma or non-inherent cause was only a matter of prejudice or conformity with venerable traditions. And so that's what a lot of us do too. I know I was doing this too at first, and it's still applicable, but sometimes that shit is just bullshit. Um, like in the Bible, some of that shit is just plain crap. But like the New Testament, there's a lot of so-called metaphysics in there, or there's a lot of esoteric meaning. A lot of people are starting to figure out. But they're saying when we start getting into materialism, atomism, you guys, when you postulate the Brahman, you're trying to please or trying to just please the crowd. You know what I'm saying? You're trying to conform to the tradition. You're trying to go against it or debate it. But then again, you're trying to conform to it by saying that. They're like, we don't need to say that. We have a self-contained system of understanding. So the Vaisheshika system was condemned by the Orthodox as semi-destructive or semi-nihilistic because of its dynamic view of nature. So it regards nature not as a being, but a process of becoming. And that's what I'm saying. That's the illusory aspect. It's always becoming, always in flux, up and down, applying growth and productivity. Like Mainlander pointed out, the plant grows and decays, grows and decays. It's like the will to die is intrinsic in it, also with the will to live, as he pointed out, Mainlander did. So it's always becoming. It's never really still. So it held that the continuous change in the size of bodies involved continuous perishing of the old and continuous rise of the new substance, as I just mentioned. So even the idea of indestructibility of matter is anticipated. So that's deep. Meaning these atoms, like they said, they're eternal. It's anticipated. So they're like, are you guys really about to say like, damn, this has always been here, huh? And you can't destroy them. They can always stay in constant flux, but are they truly being destroyed? Because, like I said, they see air as being composed of atoms. So even when you look at air, they're like, well, that's still a part of materialism, atomism. So as a matter of fact, Kananda's atomism was even more self-contained than that of Democritus. By visualizing the atoms as possessing the inherent property of coalescing and combining, it was free from the fallacy which opened the Democritean system to Aristotle's attack. Kanada's system was to a large extent free from the problem of action at a distance. In his time, it was the dominating current of thought. So action at a distance. That's the problem with Newton's bullshit. The gravity, the moon attracted by the Earth, the sun attracts the Earth. Um, and they actually, that's what the dark matter crap was about too, because people just as time goes on and information and professors they start asking more and more questions, so they had to keep coming up with more bullshit. So dark matter was to say, okay, because it's like, okay, how does the Earth sit up in the vacuum? Oh, gravity from the sun. Well, how does the sun sit up in the vacuum? Uh, well, it's not really sitting, but it's the central sun of the galaxy is pulling it, the gravitational force. Okay, so how's the galaxy sitting up? Uh, supercluster. It's in a supercluster of galaxies. So I mean, how is all this shit sitting here? Dark matter. That's what it is. Dark matter is actually holding in everything, and actually gravity is not even a part of the size. It's actually these two-dimensional plane fabricy bouncy things, and it's like, what the fuck? So yeah, they're trying to explain that action at a distance. So but like he's saying here, Kanada's system is actually more intelligent. You didn't have that problem with this intrinsic property, like I said, because they're not scared to see atoms that's having intrinsic properties, intrinsic tendencies, like Max Planck said. So in his time, it was the dominating current of thought. The Vaisheshik atomism was the common point of departure of a whole series of speculative thinkers whose contribution to the spiritual heritage of India approximated real philosophy and tried to free Indian society from the domination of the Vedic priestcraft. Like I said, they're trying to liberate you from just this blind adherence to simple concepts. That's why they always attack them in some of the sutras. Like, oh, those heretics, those atheists, those 9/11 truthers. Get those truthers, get them out of here. And the mob, yeah. Like, so that's what this is about. So, nevertheless, the unnecessary assumption of a metaphysical cause was due to the priestly prejudices from which the main currents of materialist and rationalist thought in ancient India could not liberate themselves. So, yeah, they're saying by saying there's something even outside of it. Like I said, you're kind of adding that element of like that's that slippery slope. That's when you start getting into worship. So they're like, no, it's self created. It's a tedious difference, but I see where they're going. You got to, like I said, think for yourself. Like they said, this was the point of departure for a lot of thinkers. So a lot of people, you start here, you come up with your own, your own little what you feel about it, your philosophy on it. But trust me, this is real. Like they said, they were trying to free the minds of people from the priestcraft. They call it a priestcraft, like it's a craft, and it is. You have to go, you have to construct these stories. That's their job. Like, they're writers and shit. You have to make stories for people, dramatize them, give them moral implications, just like a screenwriter. It's just like people want to go see your movie, and then they keep coming to see your movie, makes them feel a certain way. It's the same shit. Priestcraft, writer's craft, director's craft, and they try to make people, for the intelligent few, like, no, think like this. So, or let us help you think actually more rationally about it. So, nevertheless, the unnecessary assumption of a metaphysical cause was due to priestly prejudices from which the main currents of materialist and rationalist thought in ancient India could not liberate themselves. So, they always had that problem. People trying to conform back to the old schools of thought. So that was Kananda. Now, we're gonna go into Kapila. So now, when we get to Kapila, and these guys were contemporaries, sort of. He's going to be Sankaya is a school, is a system that was attributed to Kapila. Kananda would be considered the Vaisheshik system. Now, the Sankaya system is deviated largely from the strictly materialistic ground and developed rather as a rational naturalist system of metaphysics. So he's going to go into some metaphysics, Kapila is. Nevertheless, the physical principles of materialism were elaborated philosophically by Kapila. So that's what I'm saying. These sometimes they run into each other, sometimes they diverge. Like I said, if you just think for yourself, you can just figure out just basically what these guys are talking about. So because he elaborated on materialism, but he got a little more metaphysical than they did. So he is known as an atheist who maintained that the existence of God could not be proved by logical evidence, but the real merit of his philosophy is the recognition of the objective reality of the physical world. See, so he was different. Because when the Vedas, when they first came out with the fantastic fantasy gods everywhere, like X-Men or some shit, the first thing they try to tell people, and they saying that this is mind control because they were telling people this world is fake. Um, the real world is Brahman's world and everything, and so that's where you have to get. So this is what you have to do to get there. And they're saying, "Oh, what the fuck?" Like, damn. So that was their exploitation of the fake world concept by saying the world's fake because you can exploit it. Now, again, you can still say, "Well, but it is fake." But like I said, not objectively. He just came to say, okay, but objectively speaking, this shit is real. So that was one of he's a materialist to come out and say that with no qualms. So the Sankhya system decidedly rejects the doctrine that the external world has no objective existence and that nothing exists but thought. Because that's the idealism, and a lot of people saying that now. I know a lot of people get into Buddhism and Zen, and all they do is just say how they are mind and that's all they are. And it's like, yeah, fool. I mean, you could try to say that, but like I said, you till you stub your toe and then it's not just mine, or till them bills hit your ass, or cops pull you over. All kinds of shit happen in the world that you're like, damn. Now, is there truth in that? Of course, because that's when you get into law of attraction and synchronicity with the mind. But they're saying, yeah, to say that is kind of reckless, right? So, arguing against some earlier philosophers who are characterized by the commentators as heretics or nihilists, Kapila lays down not thought alone exists because there is the intuition of the external world. Then, since if one does not exist, the other does not exist, there is a void. So, yeah, uh, like you're saying. So, how can thought alone exist because we have intuition of the external world? So, how could it just be thought? Um, like, and like, you could touch something in front of you, even if you go away, that something is still there. So, it still has an independent existence outside of just saying, oh, it's just your thoughts. Well, it's just not your thoughts, right? So, so like he says, since if one does not exist, the other does not exist, there is a void. So you can't say one or the other just exists alone. You're saying there is an objective existence to the external world. So there's a commentator who is going to interpret Kapila's work. He says, the reality is not thought alone because external objects also are proved to exist, just as thought is by intuition. If external things do not exist, then a mere void offers itself. Because if the external world does not exist, then thought does not exist, for it is intuition that proves the objective. And if the intuition of the external did not establish the objective, then the intuition of thought also would not establish the existence of thought. Rewind that. But yeah, these guys are very intelligent. And see, this is not religiosity. You got to analyze here and think. You may have to reread it. Read it one day. You'll get it a little deeper. Go to sleep on it. Read it again tomorrow. Read it again, and then you'll start to understand what they're saying. Because this is intelligent thinking here, and it's not you don't get it on the first try. That's not how it works. So the analogy with the point of departure of Descartes' rationalism is obvious. But there is more than pure rationalism. The theory of cognition is definitely materialistic. So Descartes says cogito ergo sum, which is I think, therefore I am. So, but then they go on to say, well, Kapila is going to extrapolate on that, or he's going to expand. So, theory of cognition is definitely materialistic. The underlying principle of Sankhya theory of knowledge is identical with the modern materialist principle that consciousness is determined by being. That's why I said, well, even though Darwin is some bullshit, Big Bang is some bullshit, accidental DNA, chance combinations is bullshit. They do know that the Dawkins types, you know, uh, they do understand that, because he agrees here. This is even some these ancient guys who said, you know, consciousness is determined by being. there's no, like, again, when this body, this being ceases or breaks apart, there is no consciousness. There's no self-consciousness. The defenders of the religious doctrine of creation tried to silence the inquiry about the origin of things by denying the reality of the world itself. There's the key. There's the key. Now I know a lot of people see the reason I'm going through this, because a lot of people, you think you get it. I'm not religious. Well, I understand the Big Bang. People still believe in the globe and everything. The Big Bang and this is the universe, this is the galaxy. But like I said, people are still thinking about this souls and reincarnation, which means they haven't really analyzed it yet. So this, people think, oh, I already know this. I already know about atoms, but you haven't really analyzed it yet. To really dig into it, and this is why I found this stuff so interesting, because they're saying they're trying to silence the inquiry. They don't want you to think. Like, this is what we already noticed with Illuminati, Rockefeller. I just want workers, not thinkers. Like, yeah, economically don't want you to think. The spiritual leaders, the religiosity, the priestcraft don't want you to think. So they're like, oh, you know what? That's fake. Don't even think about it. Fuck it. You got to get to heaven. That's what you got to get to heaven. That's it. They're using that concept to say that. So, because they don't want you to think about the origin of things. If you do, you realize that's all. It's all bullshit. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, these are all like DC Comics, Marvels. These are script writers. That's what they are. They're very creative script writers, character creators. That's all they're doing. Some of them have wise intentions. Some of them want to teach lessons. But I mean, please, who's got time for that bullshit in this world like this? Like, you know what I'm saying? Give me the real. Like, what's, you know what I'm saying? If I want to understand creation, I want to understand creation, goddamn it. So, not just God, evil, no, nah. So, I'm not saying there's no place for mythology, but there's a difference between mythology and religious drama, or just, or religious command, or religious penance, religious obligation. Feed this guy, praise this guy. That's a difference. Mythology is different. It's trying to describe, principles to you with characters. So I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, like they're saying, you're trying to silence the inquiry about the origin of things by denying the reality of the world itself. So they argued that a thing of a dream and unreality did not need a substantial origin. So Kapila retorted, the world is not unreal because there is no fact contradicting to its reality, and because it is not the false result of depraved senses, leading to a belief in what ought not be believed. Because, yeah, so see, he's really challenging. So he's like, well, how can you say this is fake? And people hate that. Like, a lot of, like, we got to come back to the admission that, well, come on, it's relatively real. It's hell. Like, so he's, because they would say, well, it's just the senses. Well, the senses are fake, so you shouldn't believe anything from the senses anyway. Well, no, as long as there's a you, that's what you are. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's like when you say that, you're trying to say, well, there's a real me, not in this world. Like I said, that's that stork dropping baby bullshit. So, but as long as you're you, this is real. That's what he's saying. Senses, no, this is real. Then, if I burn you, you feel that, you burn. That's real. You're not gonna sit there. Oh, this is the depraved sense of touch. It's not even. It's just a sense of touch. Oh, it's not real. No, it's real. And I'll go into how now what these guys practice when they get deep into these yogic practices, because all their systems of philosophy and speculation correspond to a practice. Because one guy said, oh, they these preacher types. Oh, you shouldn't be thinking like that. Oh, you're like a human scientist. You should stop thinking. You need to just praise Brahma. Just go da 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 da. Like, no. As long as you're you, your brain is here. You do speculate, and you do have a certain vision of the world that you exist in as of now. So, no, you don't just not think about it. But you do want to get clear on it because you don't know. One of the reasons you want to get clear on it because you were brainwashed by parenting and culture, so you don't know shit. That's why they go through this. You have to deprogram yourself and get a true understanding of it, non-dogmatic, sober understanding. So it is necessary. So you can't just say don't think and just sit there like a dunce. No. These guys are putting forth intelligent discourse. So fail. So this is clear enough. But Kapila goes farther to the extent of stating the fundamental principle of the rationalist materialist view of the world. A thing is not made out of nothing. So that's the atomism. They're saying these eternal atoms with intrinsic inherent properties. This is what he's saying. A thing is not made out of nothing. So the bottom is knocked off the doctrine of creation. The origin of the physical world is traced to an endless process of causality, and that process is inherent in nature. Existing eternally by itself, the world does not need a creator or creation. So that's deep too. He's even said, well, the hell with the word creation, which I mentioned, like, it's created. It is a creation, right? He said, well, yeah, okay. And I see what they're saying. That's why I said self-creation versus a push from this father force or whatever. This, this force that, like I said, slippery slope. Because now you're gonna start worshiping this force in a minute. This push, it's not creation by that. It would be self-created. So I would say finally self-creation is what I would consider it, a self-creation. So nor is there any beginning, because in that case also something would come out of nothing. So that's what I'm saying. They're saying this beginningless. Thus, the Sankhya system rejects even immanent theology, a doctrine made fashionable by some philosophers of our time. So yeah, the immanent theology, they're saying, it's designed, so there must be a designer, and he has a purpose, and you're like, nah, we don't have a purpose because, well, it's always in flux, and there's no ultimate purpose. So that's what I would say there. What's the purpose? I mean, like, what's the meaning to life? But you don't need to ask that question. All you gotta do is go look at what everything's doing every day, and that's what the meaning of life is. There's no purpose beyond that. We're talking about this self-created thing that's always in flux. Uh, you know, Spontaneous growth and decay, perpetually. So the materialist essence of the Sankhya system is confused by its apparent rejection of atomism. But the very argument advanced for the purpose implies a more perfected form of materialism. So this is where Kapila tries to go even beyond atomism. And he says, what is limited cannot be the substance of all. So, together with the Vaisheshika, the Sankhya system also reduces the gross elements to atoms, but Kapila traces the severally existing atoms down to a still simpler, all-pervading substance. So, this is where he gets, they would call it metaphysical. This is where you can look at like an ether. To go even deeper, there's an ether that's interconnecting all things. And this is very much the same as done by Aristotle, but there is no evidence whether he resorted to this expediency to avoid the baffling problem of action at a distance. However, by seeking the ultimate substance beyond the atoms, Kapila anticipated the most modern conception of substance instead of rejecting materialism. So he didn't reject materialism, but Kapila came in and said, well, okay, we do have these atoms, I agree, but is there some type of non-local all-pervading substance that they arise in or they exist within? So again, you could say this is their way of saying, okay, dark matter, like I said, ether, like the space people did. See, so again, this is just using some rationale. Like I said, you can come up with your own conclusions. So Kapila visualized existence as a hierarchy, so to say, composed of 25 realities. In addition to the soul, nature, mind, and self-consciousness, there are subtle elements, sense organs, and gross elements. The pyramid stands on the apex, meaning, of course, the pyramid is upside down. Reverse the order and you have a process of evolution. So the word evolution is used here, but we're not talking about Darwinian evolution. But Kapila conceived the process in the Hegelian fashion as idea expressing itself. Where do we hear that? Schopenhauer brought that up. The world as will and representation, idea. Mainlander and Schopenhauer, they talk about this idea. So, but like they're saying, this is a representation of idea. Like I said, a human form, those atoms, if you want to put it at that level, they have this idea of human form. The tiger is the idea of tiger form. The plant is the idea of plant form. So although the process of evolution is set on its head, the realities, however, are derived inductively from the immediately perceptible gross elements. the existence of the subtle elements, sound, color, touch, taste, and smell. He's calling these senses subtle elements. And the Taoists also correspond the five elements of the five senses too. So that's interesting too. So it's inferred from the gross elements which are directly perceptible. So like the nose picks up smell. The ear, gross element, picks up subtle element of sound. So the logic is obvious that everything that is gross is formed of something which is less gross. Right. The process is traced to the primal state of nature in which everything lies in a state of inaction. But nature is not only eternal but self-operative. Again, that's the difference between saying external pusher or the button pusher, Brahman, or just saying the self-created, self-operative. Since the root has no root, the root is rootless. So that's a quote. Since the root has no root, the root is rootless. So thus nature is the final cause. Since mind and self-consciousness are placed within the scheme of nature, they are included in the materialistic system. So there's a place again. Like you said, this is still materialism, but we know mind and consciousness. Again, these words interchangeable when you talk about mind and consciousness. So, and he said mind and self-consciousness are placed within the scheme of nature. So, again, that's where our self-consciousness comes from. These five elements, the gross elements, and then the impressions, which are considered to be subtle elements, make up our temporal ego self. So now he's gonna get into the soul thing too. He actually has a different a little different take than Kanada on the soul thing. So he says only the soul stands outside, but like Newton's Deus ex machina, it is completely unnecessary for explaining the being and becoming of the world. See, so Deus ex machina, that's fucking gravity. Made up shit. That means God intervenes. Like they would talk about it in old Greek plays when the character is just about to die and somehow some magical savior, thwarts the arrow from hitting his neck. That's Deus. Like, oh, that's a bullshit story. How the fuck? How convenient for the writer, but that's Deus ex machina, and he's saying, well, it's not necessary for explaining being and becoming in the world. So he's saying the concept of soul, he's gonna use it, but like I said, you can look at, he's saying it's outside the world basically. He's gonna go in. This is where he gets into metaphysics. He's saying there's a soul, like I said, but that would be closest I can say that was pure consciousness, because he differentiates this world, and so actually he was actually slightly Gnostic too, or he understood this concept of freedom or liberation. So he says it does have nothing to do with this world though. So he's not talking about, at this stage he's not saying you as a soul. So he's saying the existence of nature is inferred from its perceptible phenomena. These are real. They must therefore have a real cause. That is to say, the constituents of the world exist eternally. Because, see, to them, that's real is what is always is. That's what reality is. It's something that always is. That's why he's saying this nature is real. Now, it's always in flux, but he's saying, well, it always is, though, in a sense. So he's saying, which is radical. They're saying the world exists eternally, and the Gautama agreed with that too. Shakyamuni, so-called Buddha. So those ultimate elements are called in the Vaisheshika and Nyaya systems atoms. So he's recapitulating that point. Atoms. They're real because they're eternal. So Kapila reduces them to an all-pervasive existence and calls it the nature in a state of inaction. So he said, okay, there's the atoms. There's an all-pervasive existence, something that transcends it all. He was the more metaphysical. It's coming to be a little more metaphysical. So he tried to come in and say, okay, we got you, materialism. I'm with it, but I want to go a little deeper even than that. So the nature of the Sankhya in its primal state is like Spinoza's animated substance. Three qualities: goodness, passion, and darkness, inherent in nature, are the lever of all natural operations. Atomism is rejected because pain and pleasure are not properties of the atom. So that's where, see, he acknowledges the atoms, but then he says, what is the cause of pain, pleasure, and like, because they can't feel pain and pleasure. Atomism is rejected. He's saying atomism is not the final say so. It is a part of it. He's saying because pain and pleasure are not properties of the atom can't feel that. So everything in existence is an aggregate of pain, pleasure, delusion, etc., which are clearly perceptible. But here arises a very pertinent question: what is the cause of these categories or qualities? Kapila himself asserts that something cannot come out of nothing. Obviously, to avoid this dilemma, he makes his nature an all-pervading primal substance, having the three qualities in a state of equilibrium. The atomist would contend that the atom could just as well represent the equilibrium of qualities. However, Kapila's rejection of atomism leads him to a position where the materialness of nature appears to disappear. so, so Kapila comes in and he says, "Yeah, I know, I recognize the atoms. I see the atoms. Beyond the atoms, there must be ether. So then, even those disappear? And so, like I said, there's debates within these schools. So, the primal existence appears like the Brahman of the Vedantas, or the Hegelian non-being, absolute nothing. But that is far from what Kapila desires to establish. Therefore, he concludes his arguments against atomism by reaffirming the materialness of nature." So he understood atomism. He tried to absorb atomism into his system. He acknowledged it, like I said. So I'm not nullifying atomism of Kanada, but here Kapila is going to try to go a little deeper. And he concludes his arguments against atomism by reaffirming the materialness of nature. Nothing can be produced from a non-entity like a man's horn. They always say shit like that. There must be some material of which the product may consist. So, saying that, okay, we have the atoms, I acknowledge the atoms, but what is, because somebody asked me too, he's like, what are the atoms made of? So I told him that's a good question, and this is what Kapila is going into too. So yeah, like I'm saying, this it just doing these these speculations, they do it gets it works on you subconsciously. You do start to realize things, so it has value. Like I said, some people, oh, you can't inquire into nature. You speculate like a human. You're supposed to be scientists, man. Even Gautama talks about that, like be a scientist, basically think for yourself. Those are the preachers and stuff telling you that stuff. Don't think. So fail. The Sankaya system, with its rigid rationalism, cannot do without a material substratum of the world, because if that is dispensed with, everything may happen everywhere, which is an absurdity according to itself. So, okay, so the Sankaya system, with its rigid rationalism, cannot do without a material substratum of the world. The substratum, like my man said, what are the atoms made of? What connects the atoms? Like, because there is a such thing as mental influence. You could influence other people's minds. So the atoms in, vibrating or whatever you want to look picture them in my head, or a figure of speech in my head can't communicate with the ones in his head. What is that action at a distance? He would say that's the material substratum. It's kind of like a Wi-Fi that interconnects everything. So there's like, there could be 20 computers on one Wi-Fi signal, and he's coming up with a Wi-Fi instead of just saying, well, it's a bunch of computers. You're like, yeah, I see the computers, and I also see the Wi-Fi. So that's the material substratum of the world, because if it is dispensed with, everything may happen everywhere, which is an absurdity according to itself. Yeah. So okay, he's saying without that material substratum, that interconnecting substratum, everything would be happening everywhere. It would be chaos. It would be, it'd be like I guess he's saying like it'd be like that Robin Williams movie with that blob just flying everywhere, or that thing in Men in Black. It'll be chaos everywhere without that. So consequently, the Sankaya conception of primal nature cannot be essentially different from the conception of matter in motion. Its rejection of atomism, therefore, could not be a repudiation of materialism. It was done with the motive of making the physical explanation of the world free from all possible logical fallacies and all pervasive primal substance obviate the difficulty of original combination, and consequently for securing the first impulse, the postulate the postulate of a metaphysical agency is not necessary. So what he's keeping it materialistic by saying there's a material substratum uh, to avoid all logical fallacies. So this is his system. This is his take. Like I said, he says he rejected atomism. I wouldn't say he rejected it. He just, like I said, he absorbed it. So, and again, there's no agency, no outside agency still. That's what he's saying. He's still, well, this is still not an outside agency. Indeed, the mechanistic conception of nature is not only logically inherent in the Sankhya system, but becomes explicit in the definition of the properties of the pradhan. Kapila holds that just as mother's milk and water flow mechanically, just so the pradhan also, although non-intelligent, may be supposed to move from its own nature. Motion as distinct from conscious movement or intelligence is thus clearly visualized as inherent in the pradhan, which is the name for the all-pervading material substratum of the world. So pradhan is what he calls this all-pervading material substratum. This again shows that the metaphysical elements of Sankhya system are altogether superfluous, the system being self-contained as a mechanistic, materialistic conception of the world. So again, it still falls within so-called materialism and mechanistic. So as regards the soul, it is explicitly ruled out as the final cause of things, and the obvious logical deduction that the origin of things is material is clearly drawn from the superfluidity of the conception of the soul. So he says, so while both nature and soul are antecedent to all products, since the one, the soul, is devoid of this character of being a cause, it is applicable only to the other of the two, which is nature. So he's saying because nature and soul come before all, create this self-created thing, all material. Because what he means by nature is that material substratum. He doesn't mean trees, grass, water, mountains, like nature. Well, he's talking about what the substratum antecedent to that is. That's what he means by the word nature. So that's what I'm saying. It's all about these terms and what you mean. That's half the battle when you getting into this stuff. And he says, well, it couldn't be the soul because it's devoid of this character of being a cause. So it must be just nature. And this is where he's trying to differentiate because he's trying to make a point. He's saying, having divested soul of all qualities and ascribed to nature all active properties and status of the final cause, Kapila finds it very difficult to prove how the non-discrimination between the two originates. The difficulty lies in the fact that its conception of nature as a self-operative entity renders soul only an empty conception, a concession to traditional prejudice. So now they're saying, like I was saying, they're like, well, why the hell did you even bring it up? Like you say, well, it ain't nothing to do with the world anyway. But I believe in soul, and that's prejudice. So like I said, you can still believe in that concept. I would say duality versus non-duality would have to be. You could say soul is non-duality, but that you could say soul is non-duality. That's how you can look at it. That's what he's trying to say, and you could also see that he's trying to say duality is self-created. That the non-dual didn't create this duality. So difficulty lies in the fact his conception of nature as a self-operative entity renders soul only an empty conception, a concession to traditional prejudice. So again, that's trying to appeal. Like, okay, I'll say the word soul, like how we just say stuff. They're saying he's just trying to appeal to that. So he extricates himself from the position by going still another step farther away from metaphysical dualism towards materialistic monism. Understanding, mind, reason, and even ego are all discriminated from the soul as products of nature. So he goes even further. So like I've said, to make sure you don't confuse it. because basically what he's saying is, okay, they told you you had a soul and you guys were transmigrating through different lives. This life you were a farmer. This life you were a warrior. This life you were a wife. This life you were, just human to human. A doctor. But he's like, okay, that soul stuff at that level is wrong. He's like, well, maybe soul is something outside of this entirely, because he says mind, reason, and ego are products of nature, but maybe the soul concept is outside, right? So the soul is left without any function as far as the subcreation goes, of course, nature. So indeed, by its very nature, absolute, immutable, it cannot have any connection with anything. Thus, there is an unbridgeable gulf between the two ultimate categories of existence. The gulf can be bridged only by abandoning the dualist position. It is difficult to ascertain whether Kapila did that. The sutras are not very clear. So a lot of the sutras, if you go into them, you'll see that these guys go through it's very a lot of rationale of building and destroying, building and destroying. Um, a lot of it is just subconscious deprogramming, and just to get you to it serves a purpose. So these two, nature and soul, are alike without antecedent, like seed and sprout, of which it is needless to ask which is the first. The old puzzle, which was the first, the acorn of the oak, being a frivolous question. So he critiques this, because this was a commentator. So he's gonna M. Roy is gonna critique this. He says the relation between soul and nature, Prakriti and Perusia, thus interpreted, the Sankhya system becomes free of the dualist fallacy, and stands out as a self-contained materialist system. Either simultaneous existence of the two uncreated beings is admitted, or soul ceases to exist except as an attribute of nature. Then the logic of seed and sprout is faulty. The removal of this logical defeat leads to monism. Of the soul and nature, one must be the cause of the other. By its very nature, the soul of Sankhya cannot be the cause of creation, because in that case it would cease to be what it is and could never be emancipated. So there remains nature as the only real source of existence, and Kapila conceives nature as a purely material entity, self-originating and functioning mechanically. Even the so-called vital forces are the products of the mechanistic operation of the material entity, nature. The material substrata, he calls nature. So it says the most important contribution made to the development of philosophical thought by Sankhya system, however, is its sensationalist theory of knowledge. Kapila was an out-and-out empiricist. He holds with an admirable logical rigor that sense perception is the only reliable source of knowledge as far as communicating and compiling knowledge. Because, like I said, a lot of people, that's where we get mob form of religion. It's just people just saying shit like you don't know, like, oh really, oh, wow. It's like going to watch a movie. It's like, well, you know let's use real life if we're gonna to tackle this question. We don't need to go and get entertained to tackle this question of existence necessarily. So you know he was admired for that, and he was a cultivator too. There's they always depict him somewhere in the forest meditating. So yeah, these guys, they meditate, and they have they clear out their consciousness, but like I said, there's still a brain there, so there's still an intellect, and the further they get, they try to conceive and just visualize creation from the inside out. It is held that the organs, external that is of perception and internal that is of inference, are products of nature. They are not depraved. That is, they do not portray as real what is not real. So that was one of his core things, like stop saying it's fake. And really, like I said, you shouldn't even use the word fake, because your conscious mind knows what the word fake means, and you know this shit ain't fake in that sense. You're gonna have to get a little deeper to say it's fake, right? So he had to come out and say, well, no, it's real enough. So your senses are not fooling you, in the sense that as you are here, this is real. What you see is what you get. What you feel is what's real. So therefore, whatever is established on the evidence is real. Since the organs bear testimony to the existence of the external world, its reality is established. So he was very adamant about that. So while the Sakya system thus expounded an atheistic naturalism, the Vaisheshik and Nyaya system tended clearly towards materialism. So, like I said, see how they categorize and differentiates, but they are interrelate. So that very significant evolution of thought out of the background of Vedic religion and the metaphysical speculation of the Upanishads and the fullness of time ushered in the golden age of India, that is the Buddhist period. So, bringing it back to the Charvakas, which I mentioned early on, they laughed at the notion that the Vedas were divinely revealed truth. They held that truth can never be known except through the senses. Therefore, the idea of soul is a delusion. The Charvaks thus anticipated the modern philosophical thought of ultra empiricism. They held that even reason was not to be trusted because every inference depended for its validity not only on accurate observation and correct reason, but also upon the assumption that the future would behave like the past, and of this there was no certainty. That was anticipating modern agnosticism more than 2,000 years before Hume, that scientist Hume. But the Charvaks were not mere nihilists, agnostics, and skeptics. They developed an elaborate system of positive philosophical thought. So, this is the Charvaks here. All phenomena are natural. Neither in experience nor in history do we find any interposition of supernatural forces. Matter is the only reality. The mind is matter thinking. That's another point. Like I said, like the Dawkins types, when they wouldn't say that. He said matter is only reality. The mind is matter thinking. So that's kind of creepy too when you think about it. Like when you look at a person, a being, or anything. Yeah, that's the matter is thinking. Like I said, get the concept, discard the word, and you'll get it deeper. The hypothesis of a creator is useless for explaining or understanding the world. Men think religion necessarily only because, being accustomed to it, they feel a sense of loss and an uncomfortable void when the growth of knowledge destroys faith. Bobby Hemmett talked about that. How like as soon as we destroy this God being, people will be lonely. Like that's what people say. Like Jesus, that's what you do in America. Say Jesus or the Lord. Like they have this imaginary friend. I mean, this is literally an imaginary friend. Now there's value in it because it's like a thought form. And if you believe in it, if you have faith in it, it'll give you a certain faith and courage to go get your next piece of cheese. But it's not really real. It's an imaginary friend. So they're saying, well, we destroy that stuff and people are not going to have that. And he's saying that's what you really fear. It's like Bobby Hemmings said, it's kind of lonely when you don't have a God to pray to. That's what a lot of this has to do with. That's what he's saying. So he says morality is natural. It is a social convention and convenience, not a divine command. It's just a social convention and convenience, not a divine command. That's what I said. There's no account of vice and virtue. There is no need to control instincts and emotions. They are commands of nature. The purpose of life is to live, and the only wisdom is happiness. So these guys were they were kind of worldly types. They were saying, well, you can't say this is fake, so we can just live our lives. Now, this is where Gautama would come in and say he would apply a value judgment to it and say, well, you guys are saying all that, but actually, I agree with your system of logic, but life is suffering. That's where Gautama comes in with that awful, ugly truth. Peace.